the zipper stuck halfway up her back, the small metal teeth catching on fabric that had grown just slightly too tight around her middle. Maria pulled once, gently at first, testing the resistance. Then again, with more force, her arm twisted awkwardly behind her as she tried to see what was catching in the mirror's reflection. Finally, she stopped, letting her arm fall to her side, and stood there in her bedroom, staring at herself in the full-length mirror that had witnessed so many of these moments. It wasn't the dress. She knew that immediately, instinctively. The dress was fine. A simple navy blue sheath she'd found on clearance 3 weeks ago. The kind of modest, professional garment that wouldn't draw attention but wouldn't shame her either. She'd tried it on in the store's harsh fluorescent lighting, checking every angle, and it had fit then. It still fit now, technically. The zipper would close if she held her breath and stood perfectly straight. No, it wasn't the dress. It was the day. It was the accumulation of every day like this one, stacked like bricks into a wall she'd been climbing for years. It was the weight of showing up when you're not wanted, of taking up space when you've been told repeatedly that you take up too much, of walking into rooms where your presence is considered an imposition rather than a gift. She looked at herself, really looked, and thought one simple thing that cut through all the noise in her head. I made it this far. Her reflection showed a woman of 43 with dark hair that had started to gray at the temples, which she'd stopped trying to hide a year ago. Her face was round, soft in places the world had taught her to hate, marked by fine lines that came from smiling through things that weren't funny and holding her expression neutral when she wanted to scream. She wasn't thin. She had never been thin, not even as a child, and after her daughter was born, her body had settled into curves and softness that no amount of skipped meals or late-night walks seemed to diminish. She'd fought that body for decades. Tonight, standing in this room, she felt something close to a truce, too. The dress wasn't expensive. She'd paid $23 for it, and she'd felt guilty about that expense for a week afterward. It wasn't trendy, with its simple cut and lack of embellishment, but it was clean, carefully pressed that morning while the coffee brewed, and chosen with the kind of care that comes from knowing you'll be judged no matter what you wear. So you might as well wear something that makes you feel like yourself. When she finally worked the zipper all the way up and smoothed the fabric over her hips, she felt that familiar silence beginning to gather in the house around her. It was the kind of silence that judges without saying a word, the kind that lives in the space between people who have forgotten how to be kind to each other. She could hear him in the living room, the television playing too loud the way he always had it, the sound of his presence filling the house with a particular quality of emptiness. For a moment, she considered staying in the bedroom. She could text her daughter, say she wasn't feeling well, let this night pass without her. But then she thought of Sophia's face when she'd brought home the graduation program 2 weeks ago, her finger pointing to her own name listed among the honors students, her voice bright with barely contained excitement. "You'll come, right, Mom? You promise?" So Maria took a breath, checked her reflection one final time, and walked out of the bedroom. He was sitting in his usual chair, one ankle crossed over the opposite knee, scrolling through his phone with the television remote in his other hand. He looked up when she entered, and she saw it happen. That quick assessment, that flicker in his eyes that traveled from her face down to her feet and back up again, cataloging and calculating and finding her wanting. "You're going out like that?" Marcos asked, and though the words were shaped like a question, they landed like a statement. A laugh lived underneath his breath, not quite released but present enough for her to hear its shape. She pretended not to hear. 20 years of marriage had taught her this, if nothing else. Arguing with cruelty only feeds it. Engaging gives it substance, makes it real in a way that silence doesn't. So she walked past him to the small table by the door where she'd left her purse, checking inside it for the 3rd time to make sure she had everything. Phone, wallet, tissues, the small card she'd bought for Sophia. "Keys are in the car," he said, standing up now, grabbing his own jacket from the back of the couch. Of course he was coming. He would never miss an opportunity to be seen as the supportive father, the family man. That was part of his particular genius. He understood performance, knew how to play the role of devoted husband and parent in public, while saving his small cruelties for private moments, For car rides and quiet rooms where no one else could hear. In the car, as they pulled out of the driveway and onto the street, he tossed the comment like trash out a window, casual and careless. In front of everyone? Bold choice. She didn't answer. She couldn't trust her voice not to shake, not to reveal the hurt that she'd promised herself she wouldn't show anymore. Instead, she pulled out her phone, checking it with fingers that trembled slightly despite her best efforts to keep them still. A message from Sophia was waiting, sent 20 minutes ago. "Mom, I'm looking for you. Saved you a seat up front." That's when she smiled. A real smile, the kind that started somewhere deep in her chest and spread across her face before she could stop it. Because whatever else was true, whatever words Marcos threw at her, or thoughts he had about her body, her worth, her right to exist in spaces he deemed important, she had this. She had a daughter who wanted her there, who had saved her a seat, who sent blue hearts and looked for her in crowds. The ceremony was being held in the hotel ballroom downtown, the kind of place that tried to be elegant on a municipal budget. As they walked in, Maria took in the round tables covered in white linens, the small centerpieces of carnations and baby's breath. The banner stretched across the stage. "Congratulations, class of 2025. Families were already filling the seats, cameras out, children in uncomfortable formal wear, squirming in chairs, while their parents smiled and chatted with other parents. The air smelled like the hotel's industrial carpet cleaner and someone's too strong perfume. The ceremony was beautiful in the way these things always are, a mixture of genuine emotion and practiced routine. There were speeches from the principal and the valedictorian, presentations of awards for perfect attendance and academic excellence. Families clapped and cheered, phones and cameras held high to capture moments that would be watched and rewatched for years. Maria sat in the seat Sophia had saved for her, smoothing her dress over her knees, and tried to shrink, an old habit, unconscious and ingrained. She made herself smaller in her chair. She angled her body slightly away from the aisle. She crossed her arms over her stomach, then uncrossed them when she realized what she was doing, then crossed them again because she didn't know where else to put her hands. This was survival instinct, the practiced art of taking up less space, of making herself less noticeable, less offensive, less there, beside her. Marcos whispered to the man sitting on his other side, someone he'd recognized from somewhere, work, maybe, or some other intersection of their lives. She heard her name in the whisper, though it was spoken like it belonged to someone else, like he was talking about a stranger rather than the woman sitting inches away. She heard the word fat. She heard the man's polite, uncomfortable laugh in response, the kind of laugh that says, "I hear you, but I don't want to be part of this." Her chest tightened like someone had pulled a cord around her ribs and was slowly, methodically, cinching it tighter. But she didn't cry. She wouldn't cry, not here, not in public, not where people could see and judge and confirm what they already thought they knew about her. Life had trained her better than that. Childhood had taught her to absorb insults like blows, to take them into her body and let them settle somewhere deep where they wouldn't show on her face. Marriage had refined the lesson, had taught her that showing pain only invited more of it. So she sat there, breathing carefully, thinking about anything else. She thought about the laundry she'd need to do tomorrow. She thought about the grocery list on her phone. She thought about the plot of the book she was reading. Anything to keep the tears from forming. Anything to keep her face neutral and calm. Then the moderator stepped to the microphone, glanced at her notes, and announced the next speaker. Sofia Martinez's name echoed through the room, bouncing off the high ceiling and the carpeted floors. The girl stood up from where she'd been sitting with the other honors students on the side of the stage. She was wearing the white dress they'd picked out together, the one Maria had stayed up late to hem because they couldn't afford tailoring, the one that had required 3 trips to different stores before they found it on sale. Sophia walked to the center of the stage with steady hands, hands that knew how to hold things without dropping them, hands shaped by watching her mother fall and stand back up alone, over and over, year after year. Maria's heart was pounding now, a different kind of tightness in her chest. Sophia hadn't told her she'd be speaking. This wasn't on the program she'd brought home. What was happening? Sophia stood at the microphone, adjusting it slightly for her height, and looked out at the audience. The room had that expectant hush that falls over crowds when they're waiting for words, when they've been trained by hours of ceremony to settle and listen. Maria could see her daughter's chest rise and fall with a deep breath, could see the slight tremble in her fingers before she gripped the sides of the podium. "Tonight," Sophia said, her voice clear and steady in the microphone, carrying to every corner of the ballroom, "I don't want to thank my teachers." A soft murmur moved through the audience. This wasn't how these speeches usually went. Parents shifted in their seats. The principal, sitting to the side of the stage, looked slightly concerned. "Or my friends," Sophia continued, "or even the school." She took another breath, and Maria watched her daughter's eyes search the crowd, moving systematically through the rows until they found her, locked onto her, held her gaze like an anchor. "I want to thank the person who never left. Not when money was tight and we had to choose between electricity and groceries. Not when time was short because she was working 2 jobs and still made it to every parent-teacher conference. Not when people said she wasn't enough, wasn't the right kind of mother, wasn't what they expected or wanted to see." The room went completely silent. Even the children who had been fidgeting stopped moving. "My mom." People shifted in their seats. That collective rustle of an audience suddenly uncertain where to look. Beside Maria, she felt Marcos freeze, his entire body going rigid. "I was told many times throughout my life that she wasn't the right image," Sophia said. And her voice didn't waver now, didn't soften or apologize. "I was told this by family members, by other parents, sometimes by people who didn't even know us but thought they had the right to an opinion. I was told she should hide, that she should be embarrassed, that I should be embarrassed of her." Maria felt the ground disappear beneath her. Her hands were shaking now, trembling in her lap where she'd pressed them together. Her eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back all night, all year, all the years of her life. "But she's the one who taught me to study when I was so exhausted I couldn't see straight," Sophia continued. "She's the one who showed me how to stand alone when it was necessary, how to be kind even when the world isn't kind to you, and to never, ever laugh at someone who's fighting just to survive." The tears were falling now, streaming down Maria's face, and she didn't care who saw. Let them see. Let them all see. "My mother worked night shifts at the grocery store so I could go to the better school district. She wore the same 3 outfits for years so I could have new clothes when I needed them. She went without so I would never have to feel what without means. And she did it while people, sometimes even people in her own home, made her feel like her love wasn't enough, because her body didn't fit the right shape, because she didn't look the way they thought a mother should look." Sophia's voice broke just slightly on these words, just enough to show the emotion beneath the steady delivery. "If I'm standing here today, if I earned these honors, if I'm going to college on scholarship in the fall, it's because I grew up watching a woman too strong to fit inside small-minded opinions. I watched her get knocked down and stand back up. I watched her doubt herself and still show up. I watched her love me even when she was taught not to love herself." The audience stood. It started with one person, then rippled across the room like a wave, everyone rising to their feet. Applause building from quiet appreciation to something thunderous. Some people were crying, mothers mostly, women who understood in their bones what Sophia was describing. Some were clapping with their hands above their heads. Some were just standing there with their hands over their hearts. Marcos couldn't clap. His hands were frozen in his lap, his face drained of color, his eyes fixed on something in the middle distance. After the ceremony, after the official photos and the congratulations from teachers, and the small reception with cheap champagne and sheet cake, Marcos found Sophia in the hallway outside the ballroom. Maria saw it happen, saw him approach their daughter with that particular expression he wore when he was about to exert authority, to put someone back in their place. "You went too far," he told Sophia, his voice low but sharp, meant to cut. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." Sophia didn't raise her voice. She didn't step back or look away or apologize. She was her mother's daughter in this moment, Maria realized, trained by the same life to stand in the face of cruelty without flinching. "No," Sophia said simply, You embarrassed yourself. I just told the truth." Maria stepped closer then, moving to stand beside her daughter. For the first time in 20 years, she didn't lower her eyes when Marcos turned to look at her. She met his gaze straight on, saw the anger there, the wounded pride, the realization that something had shifted and he couldn't shift it back. "I spent years thinking I had to shrink to be loved," Maria said quietly, her voice steady even though her heart was racing. "I spent years thinking that if I could just be smaller, quieter, less visible, then maybe I would be enough for you. Maybe you would stop being ashamed of me. Maybe I would stop being ashamed of myself." She took a breath, and Sophia's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "Tonight I realized something," Maria continued. "Anyone who couldn't respect me, who couldn't see my worth, who made me feel like I had to apologize for existing, they never deserved to stand beside me in the first place." Opor. She left with her daughter then, walking out of the hotel and into the parking lot where the night air was cool and clean. They were laughing by the time they reached the car. That slightly hysterical laughter that comes after tension breaks, after you've said the thing you were afraid to say, and discovered that the world didn't end. They took pictures in the parking lot, Sophia holding her honors certificate, while Maria wrapped her arms around her from behind, both of them grinning at the camera in Sophia's phone. They drove to the all-night diner on Route 7 and ordered pancakes even though it was almost midnight, sitting across from each other in a vinyl booth while a tired waitress brought them coffee and orange juice. They talked about college, about the apartment Sophia would move into in August, about the classes she was excited to take, and the person she wanted to become. They talked about the future like it was something bright and open, full of possibility instead of limitations. Marco stayed behind at the hotel. Maria imagined him standing in that hallway, watching them leave, alone with the other parents who were gathering their children and their cameras and their memories of a beautiful night. He was alone with a laugh that had turned heavy in his chest, bitter in his mouth. Alone with the certainty that he had lost far more than an argument or a moment of public embarrassment. He had lost the place he never knew how to earn, the respect he thought he deserved simply by showing up, the love he'd treated like it was his by right instead of a gift that could be withdrawn. In the diner, under the fluorescent lights, Maria looked at her daughter, this brilliant, brave girl she'd raised, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt proud. Not just of Sophia, though God knows she was proud of Sophia. She felt proud of herself. Proud that she'd stayed. Proud that she'd shown up. Proud that she'd loved her daughter fiercely even when she'd forgotten how to love herself. Proud that all those years of being too much and not enough and wrong somehow had produced this. A girl who stood on stages and told the truth, who defended her mother without hesitation, who had learned to recognize love by watching it in action, rather than listening to empty words. The zipper that had stuck that evening seemed like something from another life now. A different woman's problem in a different woman's house. Maria ate her pancakes and listened to her daughter talk about the future, and she thought, I made it this far, and I'm still here, and that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.